Started. So welcome everyone. We're finishing our study of Today I Begin a New Life by Dave Blanchard. We're on the last section on physical creation. And there was a ton of great stuff in here. So he used a lot of stories. Some I've heard him say in person, which was really fun. And, some it was really nice to listen to because you got a little different nuance to a few of them that, when he tells them over and over, maybe he changes it around a little bit. So it was fun reading it. But let's talk a little bit about what we get out of this section. We spent the last two classes talking about the mental creation. And so once we have a mental creation, then we go into the physical creation because nothing's going to happen unless we do that part. Hey, Sarah's here. Awesome. So tell me what you guys liked, what you got out of that section, what struck you, what spoke to you. Hi, Sarah.
Hi, how are you?
Good.
It was a really good section. I'm a procrastinator. So the ones that really spoke to me, and that I'm going to reread this section again, but like in the very first, just the characteristics and affirmations that all those things I feel I am, but like when I read that I am productive, I know when something needs to be improved. I understand what needs to be done to make it better. But the third thing is the thing that I don't always do. And I take the action needed to create it. And I really like that one. And that's something that I really need to work on in my own life.
Yeah, I think that section that part spoke to me also. Because I think what happens to me when I procrastinate is then I take the easy route. I make it as easy as I can. And gosh, who was I talking to? Was it you? We're talking about when that water takes the path of least resistance. Oh, in church yesterday. There we go. Our bishop got up and was speaking, and he talked about, how water takes the path of least resistance, but it's not always the best path, on a road or anything you want. And I'm trying to remember exactly the analogy, but I tend to be water when I procrastinate, because it gets to the end and it's like, okay, I'm just going to do this, the easiest, fastest way I can, because that's the amount of time I have. Yep. So yeah, I can relate to that part with you. What else, ladies?
Well, I actually finished the book. I listened to the rest of it yesterday, so I'm
awesome.
Yeah, woohoo!
I was a little worried. But it had a lot of great points. So many that you probably need to go back through it and appreciate it, type of a thing.
It's almost, I like what you said there, because it's almost like we needed to read the whole book to appreciate the previous chapters.
Right.
To get to the physical creation.
Right.
But I did think about, I am compliant. I act with caution and prudence. I recognize the value of doing things in an organized, structured way, even when it may keep me from doing things the way I want to do them. And it seems like he talked in there about how we can be stubborn and obstinate about doing things the way that's maybe for the best, because we want to do it our way. And so then we don't get it. It's not done as great as it could be, or as well as it could be. And being stubborn and hard-headed.
And it's kind of like that argument where he was talking about, do you have to be right all the time? And wow, that would have solved so many conflicts in my entire life.
Right, yeah. Do I have to be right? And to just, let that go.
Yeah.
Even when I'm annoyed.
an opportunity came up for it today, and I could have been right. I know I'm right. I know as a matter of fact, I know I'm right. But what's the point?
Yeah.
And that's kind of where I came off to finally. And I actually think it went better because of that.
Cool. So you use that principle, you kind of just.
Yeah, and it was totally because I read that book, because otherwise I would not have done that, because I was right.
Mm-hmm. But you knew that being right wasn't going to get you where you wanted to go.
Right. It was just going to cause hurt feelings, and nobody was going to work together, and it was not going to be good. So.
Right. I know I get caught in that loop sometimes. I was at camp with the young women, and I can't remember. It was somebody, I had made a suggestion, and then they were different people were saying, oh, so-and-so said that. And then so-and-so said that, it was all these different people. And it was like, I opened my mouth to say, I said it. And I thought, who cares? But then someone said, no, I think Terry said that. And I said, it really didn't matter. It didn't matter who said it. It's a fabulous idea. But it didn't matter that everyone knew. But I thought about that. I thought, does it really matter who said it? It just matters that it was what we needed to do to get the job done.
Yep.
But how often do we kind of get in that argumentative loop? And it's not helping us at all. It doesn't matter who's right or who's wrong. It just matters that, you're working together to achieve something good.
Yep.
There was another principle in this book. I think it was the one about, I think it was in this book. I hope it was something about he called up his friend and he apologized after they had been in business for so long.
Yep.
And that they ended up being friends again, but it took like 10 years or something.
Yeah.
To get back. There was a lot of pain or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, why don't we do things like that? I think we get older and we kind of write each other off. And I don't know why we do that.
Yeah. You're right. I remember that. It was like in the section before last, I think, but it was still a great analogy of how we undermine ourselves. I mean, how many times have you heard, it seems like I've heard of a brother, two brothers or something, and they haven't spoken in years and years. And it's because some little stupid thing that happened when they were in their early 20s or something, and they just never have forgiven themselves, and they missed out on all that time together. I read a book just recently, and it was about this woman who had done all this wonderful stuff for people, but her and her sister were not, had been estranged for like 40 years. And and then her sister finally came, and she was invited by someone else, and the sister slammed the door in the other sister's face when she came to the door, and then but later that night that sister died. And now they can never, they missed all that time together. They used to be really close, and because of something that had offended one of them, or I don't know, had done something, they had never quite been able to do that. And it's just, those things are just not worth it. It's just amazing how stubborn we can be, how big those things become over time.
Yeah.
So I thought that was a great story, Sarah. It really spoke to me. I liked the story about calling his dad. He was sitting at his desk and he was working, and he just felt prompted to call his dad. I think that's what's really important for us, to be really in tune with those promptings that are encouraging us to do something like that. And sometimes we don't know why we're supposed to call somebody or stop and do something. He's had several of those stories throughout the book. I think it was the guy that bought the gallon of milk and he couldn't figure out why he bought the gallon of milk. Do you remember that story?
Yeah, that was a good one.
It was earlier in the book, but a guy was prompted to buy a gallon of milk and he couldn't figure it out. And so he's driving home and he sees this house and he's prompted to stop at the house and take his milk. And he took the milk up to the door, and the family were like out of food, and they had a baby and they needed that milk. And he didn't know why he was prompted to do that until then. But this story about talking to his dad, because he was seeking inspiration for writing that section in his book. And he had hard feelings against his dad for some of the things he had done that he didn't understand, decisions he's made to him over his life, and that he didn't understand. And they had this great conversation, and he came to understand his dad a little bit more, and he was able to let some of those hard feelings go. And then he and his dad were able to reestablish a much closer relationship than they had before. But it was all because he decided, because he was going to go out and weed the garden. I think his wife wanted him to help her weed the garden, but he did examine it. And I thought that was interesting, because sometimes I get prompted to do things and I think, okay, is this because I just don't want to do this, or I want to do that? I liked how he kind of walked himself through that a little bit, and then realized, yep, I need to do it. It's, I don't really want to go weed the garden, but this isn't because I don't want to do that. So that was a great story. And I love the outcome of it and the inspiration his dad was able to give him to help him solve a problem. And, so often we are given those inspirations to go, and when we're seeking an answer, we just don't always know what we're supposed to do.
I like the living passion driven, that section. Well, I liked all the sections, but that one talked about like kind of what you were talking about earlier, where you take, like you said about being like water and taking the path of, the easiest path. And he points out in that section that first, we will never engage in life at this level if our secret desire is ease, a life free from stress, debt, pain, and frustration. I like that. That's true. And I think about my life, and just sometimes I just want it to be easy. And I think the section before that was when he talked about, establishing a really solid work ethic, and how his dad made him. I think that's why he was resentful of his dad too, is because his dad had him working from, morning until night, and they always had a to-do list to do. But he didn't realize until later that the joy is in the work. It's not in, and a lot of people, he talked about that. A lot of people nowadays just want success, and they don't, they just want a big house or a nice house or an easy life. But the joy is actually found in the work that we do. And that made me think that, yes, some of my most joyful moments have not been in getting what I wanted, but in the actual work that I put towards it. Like that was the most important part. And I think sometimes I forget that I put a lot of stuff off that I like the procrastination section too, but the joy does come in the work. And so if we just remember that. And I was thinking about with my own kids, I'm not so good. I mean, I make them work, but not like that. Not like, sun up to sundown. And maybe I need to do more of that. They complain. So maybe I won't, I don't let them,
it's
I
more
don't
of
make
a pain.
them lead. Yeah, it's more of a pain just to deal with them. But his dad, he talks about that, how his dad put up with his, resentment and all that. And he just kept making him do it. And I think as a parent, yeah, that's good.
Yeah, it served him well to do that. I think, I fell down on the job a lot of times that way too. And actually probably my parents did too. They worked really hard when they were young. And so they probably didn't want that from me. Do you know what I mean? They didn't realize that was a great gift we can give our families.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a good section.
And also in that same section, I mean, we talk a lot about finding our why. And so, it's in that living passion driven, but he said, we often hear, what is your why? If your why is tangled and mirrored in fantasy, your vision can never be big enough to ignite your passion. And I like that too, because I mean, sometimes we can just visualize this, great thing, and it might just be fantasy, and we're not really passionate about it. We just want a bigger house or whatever it is we want.
Yeah, and all the work that goes in, and it doesn't, all the work that goes into it doesn't drive us. I mean, he's talked about that throughout the whole book, really, about that whole fantasy piece, not getting too caught up in that. But visualizing what it, doing it, visualizing achieving the goal, but not going beyond that.
Yep.
It's kind of a fine line almost,
Yeah, I've thought that too as we were reading this. I mean, you're supposed to visualize your goal or whatever, but yeah, there's a fine line between if it's fantasy or if it's something that's going to make you passionate about that, whatever that is.
I thought about that in the context of you talking about, I think a couple of you gone through the Dave Ramsey thing. Did you do that, Shiloh, too, the Dave Ramsey thing? Yeah. I imagine visualizing paying off your house or, or paying off your credit cards or whatever it was, visualizing how you're going to feel with that zero balance. After you do that helps motivate you to get to that point. You don't go beyond that, maybe, all the money that you're going to have access to now because you're not throwing it all in your credit card debt or whatever, but you will be able to visualize how it feels to make that last payment on whatever it is,
Yep.
how that feels. But then, stopping yourself from going into how you're going to spend all that extra money, I guess. So
I don't know. My experience is there's always more.
Yeah, that's true.
We have children.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. It's like doing dishes, right?
Yeah.
As soon as you get the dishes done, there's a spoon in the sink. So there's always something.
One time, I saved up a whole bunch of money so I could start building a house or a shed or something, and both the girls needed braces at the same time. Oh, I figured it out.
That happens so often. We get a little, you get an unexpected little amount of money, and then something like that comes up, and then I got to step back and think, but I do have the money. It's not what I wanted to do with it. It kind of goes back to the, what was the one about doing it? It's not going to necessarily be done my way.
No,
I'm not going to spend that money maybe the way I anticipated, but I did have the money. And sometimes it's a little harder to be grateful for that, but especially when it's something like something not fun, so, but.
What about the the procrastination section was really awesome, but I really, really liked the living in the now section. I highlighted a bunch of stuff in that section. And some that I want to go back and
what page are you on, Jamie?
Oh boy, I don't know because I have
233.
Okay, so 233.
I loved that. I think that was the one where he had can you solve this riddle?
Oh yeah.
And how I think so, but and then how it just really talked about how I hadn't thought of it like that before, like our body is always in the now, our physical body, but our mind is rarely ever in the now. It's either thinking about the past or it's thinking about the future, whether it's, what are we going to have for dinner? What am I going to do when I'm done with this that I'm doing? I do that all the time. I'm always thinking about, okay, when I'm done with this, I'm thinking about what I have to do next instead of just appreciating the moment that I'm in. And I really thought that was a really good section.
I thought about that a lot. I thought about that with my kids. A lot of times I was always thinking about what I needed to do. And so sometimes they would talk to me and then I would be thinking about all the other things I needed to do, so I wasn't present. So I've really tried harder to be more present when people talk to me.
Yeah.
Especially like my grandchildren and my girls, because you miss out on so much, and you miss out on so many nuances in their conversation when you're not paying attention.
Mm-hmm.
You're thinking about all the other things that you have to do.
It kind of goes back to that, what you were talking about earlier with the two sisters, and then, they never had that time because they were always thinking about what had happened in the past versus
Mm-hmm.
focusing on the now, the present.
Absolutely.
Oh yeah, I found the riddle. It says, what is always present in the now, yet seldom present in the now? And it's us.
Mm-hmm. What did you think about, have you gone and listened to the scrolls they recommended? There was 3 scrolls that he recommended in this section. And one was, I will act now. And then, what was the other one? One was, I will, laugh at the, I will laugh at, I don't know, what was that one?
I think it's I will laugh at the world.
Yeah. And then there was one you're supposed, oh, here it is, yeah. I will live this day as if it is my last. You listen to that in the morning. I will act now at noon, and I will laugh at the world before going to bed, just to keep life in perspective. And I've listened to all 3 of those scrolls, and I thought, I think for the next couple of weeks, I'm going to do that. Just put that in my calendar, put the link in my calendar, and each morning listen to each of those scrolls, the morning, noon, and night. And because he used that for the creation mode to, where was it? Where he talked about the power sessions.
Oh,
using
yeah,
it for that.
That's the living in the now section.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I knew it was in that section, but I thought those 3 things, and I don't know, everybody has a different idea of what should be in the, if you had a power section, what would you do?
So the whole point of that, I highlighted that, I was trying to fully understand it. So the whole